The sky had a strange, heavy glow that evening, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. News flashed across screens worldwide, decisions made, alliances formed, words spoken that seemed ordinary but carried an invisible weight. In that moment, it was impossible not to feel that something far greater than politics was at play. Every move by nations, every handshake and press release, felt like a page from an ancient book coming alive. Hearts pounded in living rooms and offices alike, sensing the currents of destiny swirling through the world. People whispered about coincidences, but deep down, a stirring of the soul knew better. This was prophecy in action, tangible and undeniable, a vivid reminder that the stories written in Holy Scripture were not distant myths but living, breathing truths unfolding right before their eyes. The wind carried a chill, but it was not the cold of winter. It was the electricity of revelation. Streets filled with murmurs, social media erupted with debates, yet above it all, there was a quiet voice in the spirit of those paying attention. The Bible had warned of days like this, when leaders would rise, when nations would act, and the world would tilt on the edge of something monumental. Those warnings were no longer distant echoes. They were vivid scenes playing out in real time. Every decision made by powerful men and women seemed to reverberate across continents, touching lives in ways unseen. Hearts trembled as ordinary people realized that the unfolding events were not just headlines. They were living prophecy, a divine narrative intersecting with their very existence. In living rooms, offices, and quiet corners of the world, eyes were lifted to the sky, seeking understanding. The weight of history pressed down like the turning of a colossal wheel, unstoppable, inevitable. People felt a mixture of awe and fear, yet within that fear stirred a flicker of hope, a reminder that God's word was not just a warning, but also a promise. Prophecy in action is never gentle. It shakes the foundations of certainty, strips away illusions, and forces the soul to reckon with the truth. It confronts us with the reality that life is more than what we see on the surface, that the movements of nations, the rise and fall of leaders, are threads woven by a hand far wiser and far stronger than our own. Every face on television told a story, every headline screamed for attention, yet the real story unfolded in the hearts of those watching. There was a cinematic quality to it, a sense that life had paused to reveal a scene scripted by eternity itself. People felt small yet significant, like actors placed at a pivotal moment in a grand narrative. The stirring inside was unmistakable, a call to awaken, to recognize that the Bible was not a dusty relic but a living guide. Events that seemed random were in fact meticulously aligned, orchestrated like a symphony with every note carefully planned. Those willing to see felt a surge of clarity, a revelation that the prophecy they had read, studied, and prayed about was not a theory. It was a reality unfolding with precision in the fabric of human history. As night deepened, the world did not sleep. It waited, listened, and felt. There was a cinematic stillness, as if the universe itself had paused to let humanity witness the unfolding drama. Hearts that were heavy with doubt now beat with purpose. Eyes that were clouded with distraction now focused on the unseen threads of destiny. The knowledge that prophecy was active transformed fear into reverence, confusion into clarity, and passivity into action. People began to understand that history was not random, that the steps of nations were steps on a divine stage, and that every soul had a role in perceiving, responding, and aligning with the eternal plan. In that awareness, the world felt alive in a new way, charged with the intensity of destiny, the thrill of revelation, and the undeniable truth that prophecy is not a story told, it is a story lived. The room was dimly lit, the hum of conversation fading into a heavy silence as the weight of responsibility settled on shoulders that were both human and fragile. Leaders, those chosen to steer nations and guide people, were revealed not just by their titles, but by the choices they made in moments like these. Every decision felt monumental, like a single step that could tip the balance between peace and chaos. Cameras flashed, words were recorded, but the unseen consequences stretched far beyond the room, across oceans, into the lives of millions. Watching it unfold, it was impossible not to feel the pulse of destiny in every handshake, every nod, every declaration. Leadership is not a role, it is a responsibility etched in eternity, a divine calling that demands courage, vision, and unwavering moral clarity, especially when the world is watching and the stakes are unimaginably high. The tension in the air was almost tangible, as if the room itself recognized the gravity of choice. Each leader bore the weight of expectation, not just from their people, but from the unseen forces guiding history's course. Decisions were no longer just political. They were moral, spiritual, and cosmic. In that charged moment, one could almost see the invisible threads of consequence stretching into the future, binding lives, shaping destinies, and testing character. Ordinary people watching from afar felt the ripple through their own hearts, sensing that the actions of the few were the heartbeat of the many. Leadership demanded accountability, not just in public applause or criticism, but in the quiet, lonely moments when no one else could see the price of a decision. It was here, in these crucibles of choice, that true responsibility revealed itself. Outside, the world seemed to hold its breath, as if nature itself understood that leadership was being defined in real time. Flags waved in the wind, news feeds exploded, yet beneath the chaos there was a profound lesson unfolding. To lead is to stand on a precipice where every word carries weight. Every decision echoes beyond borders, and every action leaves a footprint on the soil of human history. The camera might capture a smile or a handshake, but the unseen realm witnessed courage, fear, doubt, and conviction interwoven in a tapestry of human responsibility. Leaders are more than public figures, they are stewards of destiny, and their choices illuminate the path for generations. In these moments, the soul recognizes that leadership is both a gift and a trial, an honor demanding sacrifice, wisdom, and an unwavering alignment with justice. In the stillness of a late-night office, when the world outside slept, the weight of responsibility pressed heavier than any headline could convey. Decisions made in that quiet were monumental, shaping lives in ways invisible to the eye. Each leader faced a choice between fear and faith, convenience and courage, self-interest and the higher good. Watching, it became clear that leadership is not the applause, the medals, or the praise. It is the silent, often lonely act of bearing the consequences of choices that ripple across humanity. Those who understood this felt a shiver of reverence and awe. Every handshake, every treaty, every policy was part of a story greater than themselves, a narrative written by time and touched by divine orchestration. Responsibility was not just a burden, it was a calling to rise above, to act with integrity even when the world seemed indifferent. And in that awareness, a transformation occurred, both in the leaders and in those who observed. Leadership revealed its true face not in the grandeur of ceremony, but in the courage to confront the impossible, to weigh choices with a heart anchored in morality and vision. Responsibility was no longer an abstract concept. It was a living, breathing force that demanded vigilance, wisdom, and unshakable faith. Every step, every word, every decision became a defining moment, a scene in a larger story of destiny. Watching it all unfold felt cinematic, as if history itself had paused to show humanity the cost, the power, and the sacredness of true leadership. And in that pause, hearts were stirred, souls awakened, and the understanding took root. To lead is to carry the world in your hands, guided by conscience, courage, and a commitment that transcends time. The horizon was painted with streaks of red and gold as the sun rose over capitals and villages alike, casting a surreal light on a world awakening to itself. Streets thrummed with movement, voices rose in celebration or protest, yet beneath the surface there was a hidden rhythm, an unseen reflection of hearts and souls. Nations acted, debated, and collided, but each action was a mirror of something far deeper. The struggles of governments reflected the struggles within people, their greed, fear, hope, and faith magnified across borders. As ordinary citizens watched, a startling realization emerged. The conflicts and alliances of countries were not isolated events, but vivid reflections of the spiritual and moral currents running through humanity. Every treaty, every battle, every handshake, and every betrayal was a mirror, showing both the light and shadow within nations and within ourselves. The wind carried whispers across oceans, threading through crowded markets and empty hallways of power alike, reminding all who listened that history was not random. Nations, in their rise and fall, echoed the same moral battles played out within individual hearts. Pride, humility, courage, and fear, these were not just abstract qualities. They were the forces shaping entire civilizations. Watching from afar, one could feel the cinematic tension, as if the world itself had become a theater, with each nation a character performing the eternal drama of right and wrong. Every leader, every policy, every decision reflected deeper truths about the collective spirit of humanity, and those paying attention began to see themselves in the mirror of the world. The realization was at once humbling and electrifying. The fate of nations and the fate of souls were intertwined. In city squares and quiet homes, people sensed that the world was showing them something essential, something invisible yet undeniable. The policies debated in chambers of power mirrored the choices they faced in their own lives, the struggles to act justly, to speak truth, and to stand courageously when challenged. The cinematic clarity of it all was stunning. The chaos of the streets reflected the turbulence within hearts. The rise of nations mirrored personal victories and failures, and the hidden alliances hinted at unseen spiritual forces at work. It was impossible not to feel connected, not to see the fingerprints of eternity on everyday events. Each movement of a nation, each tremor of history became a mirror, a vivid lesson demanding reflection, accountability, and courage in both the public and private spheres. As twilight descended, painting skies in shades of fire and shadow, the reflections became undeniable. The world was a mirror showing both hope and despair, courage and weakness, love and corruption. Citizens watched with bated breath as headlines screamed conflict, negotiations, and alliances, and in those words they saw themselves, their ambitions, fears, and potential for redemption. It was a cinematic revelation, a moment when the collective heart of humanity was laid bare. The nation's triumphs and failures were no longer distant stories. They were reflections of personal choices, echoes of moral decisions that shaped the destiny of millions. Understanding this, people felt both the weight and the possibility of change, realizing that by transforming themselves, they also participated in the moral shaping of their communities and the larger world. Night fell, and the stars emerged like silent witnesses, as if heaven itself were observing the mirrored dance below. The light of distant cities mingled with the celestial glow, illuminating streets, forests, and deserts alike, revealing the continuity between the seen and unseen, the worldly and the spiritual. Every conflict, every treaty, every act of courage or betrayal was a reflection, a mirror of the human heart writ large across nations. Watching this unfold felt cinematic and deeply personal, as though one were standing at the intersection of eternity and time, seeing the reflection of both the world and one's own soul. The lesson was profound. The fate of nations mirrors the state of humanity, and to change the world, one must first understand the reflections within themselves. The early morning mist clung to the streets, curling around lamp posts and trees like invisible fingers, as if the world itself was whispering a secret to those who would listen. Eyes that were awake to the signs of the times could feel the tension beneath the ordinary, headlines screaming, nations maneuvering, leaders declaring, yet the truth lay deeper, hidden beneath layers of chaos and distraction. Discernment was no longer optional, it was a necessity. To see clearly required more than observation. It demanded stillness, focus, and the courage to look beyond the surface. Those who paused felt their hearts stir with a silent recognition that every decision, Every announcement, every twist of fate was laden with meaning. In that quiet awareness, the cinematic scope of reality unfolded, a world not just of events, but of messages, warnings, and guidance waiting to be understood by eyes willing to truly see. The city roared with life, yet in the midst of noise, there were whispers only the discerning could hear. Social media posts, news segments, and casual conversations became more than information. They became signals, tiny sparks illuminating patterns invisible to the hurried and distracted. Each revelation required a careful weighing